Hello, everybody. This is Michael McPherson coming at you again with some information about Black history, U.S. American history on Black History Month. This is my 8th post. This is the 8th of February, and I just wanted to show you again, this is my primary source for information. And I love this on the back. It says too much history for 1 month. Can you see that? Too much history for 1 month. So we're going to get right to it. Today, we're going to talk about Garrett Augustus Morgan. You can see him right behind me. This guy was a pretty serious dude, interesting life. He was an inventor, editor, and entrepreneur. He was born March 4th, 1875 in Paris, Kentucky. He moved to Cleveland and began working as a sewing machine adjuster for a clothing manufacturer, which was the beginning of a lifetime of entrepreneurial achievements, developing his first invention, because he was an inventor, right? Developing his first invention, a belt fastener for sewing machines in 1901. He sold it for $150, began repairing and selling machines in 1907, opened a tailoring shop, which manufactured coats, suits, and dresses in 1909. He got up to 32 employees in that shop, and started G.A. Morgan Hair Refining Company, where he introduced the first human hair straightening process in 1913. And the story behind that is, in the sewing shop, he had developed some chemicals to shine the needles, because needles work best when they're shiny. And he realized that what he was using could actually be used to straighten hair. He patented a safety helmet, breathing device, or gas mask in 1914 after a Cleveland waterworks tunnel disaster trapped multiple workers 250 feet below Lake Erie in 1916. Morgan was called upon to bring his experimental gas mask, and he and his brother helped rescue over 20 men from a tunnel filled with smoke, natural gases, dust, and debris. His masks were worn by firefighters throughout the U.S. and protected American soldiers in the battlefield from deadly chlorine gas fumes during World War I. There's a real interesting story behind this, too. At first, when he got there, and he was telling people, put this mask on, nobody wanted to do it because they were like, what is this? I don't know if this is going to work, because people had already tried and they didn't come out. So he put it on. He went in there. Garrett went in, came out with some people. His brother went with him, came out. And after they, I guess, went in there a few times, I'm not sure, you should look this up for yourself. Other people said, okay, I'll do it too. So they went in and they pulled people out. Now, some people got awards for rescuing. They were seen as heroes. But guess what? Garrett was ignored. He didn't get an award at the time. So it was because, he was Black. Another thing that's interesting that I read is that when he was trying to sell some of these gas masks in different places, he would either have to send a white person to be his representative, and at other times he would pretend like he was a Native American person and I guess put on a little act. I can't remember, he was Chief somebody. I can't remember what the name was, in order to sell it. But when people found out he was Black, they didn't necessarily want to buy it from him. It's crazy. Awarded American, Canadian, and British patents for his three-way automatic traffic signal invention in 1923, and sold the rights to General Electric for $40,000. Can you imagine that in the 20s? $40,000. Founded and published a weekly African-American newspaper, the Cleveland Call, 1920 to 23, served as treasurer of the Cleveland Association of Colored Men, awarded first grand prize golden medal for the National Safety Device Company at the Second International Exposition of Safety and Sanitation for his gas mask, 1914, given honorary membership in the International Association of Firefighters, posthumously cited by the U.S. government in 1963 for inventing the first traffic signal, died in 1963 in Cleveland, Ohio. Just want to tell you a little story about the traffic signal thing. Morgan was prosperous enough to have a car. In fact, from what I read, he was the first Black person in town in Cleveland to have a car at a time when streets were crowded with all manner of vehicles, bicycles, horse-drawn delivery wagons, streetcars, and pedestrians all shared downtown Cleveland's narrow streets and clogged this intersection. So as the story goes, when Morgan witnessed an especially spectacular accident at an ostensibly regulated corner, because they did have some kind of signal, but it was hand, and it didn't work that well, he had an idea. If I design an automated signal with an interim warning position, which is the ancestor of today's yellow light, drivers would have time to clear the intersection before crossing traffic entered it. So when you hear about this Black man who invented the traffic light, that's who we're talking about, Garrett Augustus Morgan. So at this point, I usually give you some facts from history, what happened today in Black history, US American history. So today, what happened on February 8th, but I'm not going to give you a lot today. I'm just going to talk about two things. The first one I'm going to talk about is not that uplifting. And I was not aware of it, and it's pretty upsetting, as you can see behind me. In early February 1968, South Carolina state students in Orangeburg, South Carolina, gathered to challenge the all-star bowling lane segregation policy. This is from a Charleston, South Carolina Post and Courier paper online, parts of this. 2 days of protests at the bowling alley led authorities to deploy state troopers, police, the FBI, and the National Guard in the effort to quell the unrest and track dissident Black activists. Now, this reminds me a little bit of Ferguson, the rebellion in Ferguson near St. Louis when Michael Brown was killed. I was there. I was part of a coalition and helping to organize. So I'm familiar with this kind of reaction to Black people getting together and standing up for our rights. By February 7, a curfew was in place and students were forced to stay on campus. The next day, about 200 young people gathered on a bluff not far from one of the entrances to the school to vent their frustrations. Highway patrolmen pointed rifles loaded with buckshot at the unarmed students and became increasingly alarmed by the sight of the protesters. You know, a lot of Black people gather and, you know, people begin to get afraid, especially the police. Startled by the sight of an injured colleague who had been struck by a thrown piece of wood, and startled again by the sound of what might have been a warning shot, they fired into the crowd, killing 3 and injuring at least 28. The 3 killed were high school students Samuel Hammond, Henry Smith, and Delano Middleton. None of the students were armed, and almost all were shot in their backs, buttocks, sides, or the soles of their feet. This reminds me of Amadou Diallo, which I did a post about him a few days ago, being shot at 41 times because one of the police officers thought he had a weapon, which turned out to be his wallet, and shot first, and then the rest of the police officers shot and hail of bullets 41 times, I believe hitting them 19. Same here, one of the policemen shot because none of the students were armed, and next thing you know, I don't know if all of them, but a lot of them clearly shot, injuring 28 people and killing 3. So we'll have a short moment of silence for the 3 people killed in 1968, February 7th, Orangeburg, South Carolina. So we're going to close out things with something much more uplifting. Briefly going to talk about Debi Thomas. In 1986, figure skater Debi Thomas became the first African-American to win the women's singles at the U.S. Figure Skating Championships. A month later, Thomas went on to defeat East Germany's Katharina Witt, becoming the first African-American woman to win the Women's World Figure Skating Championships. Let's give a shout out to Debi Thomas. I remember Debi Thomas, and those were exciting times. All right, that's it. Thank you again for tuning in, for listening, watching. Another post, February 8th, about Black history, U.S. American history, and Black History Month. And hopefully I'll see you again tomorrow. Power to the people, power to the peaceful.